So let's go straight into today's session on how not to pitch. How you can avoid the biggest mistakes that most people make when they're pitching for new business. So this came from a couple of different areas. First of all, some of the tips from today come from my own experience as a professional buyer being pitched to by lots of people in the past. They also come from my own experience as a top selling salesperson when I've been pitching to people to win work, and also my work as a consultant when talking to organisations and working with them to help improve their pitches, their presentations and their sales meetings. All the tips I give you today will work for you whether you're a salesperson, you're a business owner, you're a consultant, or whether you're a non-traditional salesperson that's involved with presenting, whether that's a solicitor, an accountant, or somebody involved in the business from perhaps an operational or an admin perspective. All the techniques I give you today are going to work for you. They also will work for you if you're pitching for work at a formal pitch or presentation, whether you're presenting at some sort of meeting, or additionally, whether you're just doing a sales meeting with a prospect and want to win more business. All the techniques I give you will work for all of those scenarios. So let's have a look at what I'm specifically going to cover. What we'll cover in today's session is 4 of the biggest pitching mistakes that most people make when they're trying to win new business. I'm also going to give you some ideas on what you can do instead to get better results. Thirdly, I want to give you some real life practical examples from pitches either that I've made or I've observed other people make that have got good and bad results and how you can learn from them. Fourthly, I want to talk about where you can get more information afterwards and more resources and more ideas of things that will help you. And finally, I've got a special free bonus section at the end of this session that I don't normally give away that kind of content on a session like this. So make sure you stay till the end because that's really going to make a difference to your pitches, your presentations, and your sales meetings going forward. So I now want to look at the first mistake that people make. And a lot of these mistakes came from my own experience of pitching or being pitched to back in my professional buying days, or also when I've worked with a couple of clients and I've held pitching sessions for them. So in other words, they look for a supplier within a design or a marketing section, for example. They want somebody to come and pitch them on those, and we've had companies come and pitch them and the mistakes that they've made and how you can learn from them as well. In all that experience, one of the biggest mistakes that most people make when they're pitching or presenting to prospects is they don't define their outcome. So not defining their outcome. So what on earth do I mean by not defining their outcome? Quite simply, not thinking about the outcome beforehand, what they want to achieve or do at the end of the presentation or pitch or meeting, what they want the client to do. Because in my opinion, it's absolutely vital to think about your outcome beforehand, because in my world, you should be designing your pitch around your outcome. So think about what your outcome or objective is for the end of the presentation, and then design your presentation or pitch or design your sales meeting to achieve that. So if you're at a sales meeting and you want a second meeting with the buyer, for example, if you're at something like a Meet the Buyer event and you've only got 10 minutes to pitch now, but you want a further meeting to go into more detail. If it's some kind of presentation to get you through to the next stage, think about what that outcome is and then design your pitch or presentation to have the best chance of getting it. Thirdly, you want to have a secondary outcome or a secondary objective as well. You might also call this a fallback objective. What I want us to do here is that if we can't get our primary outcome, or the buyer or decision maker is not willing to commit to that right now, we need to have a secondary objective we can get some commitment to in order that our presentation, pitch or sales meeting and all our efforts aren't completely wasted. So if your primary outcome or objective was a sales meeting one-to-one, for example, your secondary objective might be a conference call or some sort of demonstration or web demo. Again, design your presentation that if it doesn't hit your primary objective, you can get your fallback or secondary objective, and you've got a lot better chance of your presentation, pitch or meeting being more successful. You'll also want to consider what the prospect outcome is. And I'd even ask that at the beginning of my presentation, pitch, or meeting. What is their objective from the meeting or presentation? What do they want to get out of it? Once you understand that, it can then be a win-win situation for both parties. Both parties are happier and their outcomes are more likely to be achieved. That makes for a far more successful presentation, pitch, or sales meeting. Okay, I've got a number of mistakes that people make. This is the second one I want to talk about in today's session, which is actually mistake number 5, and this is not tailoring your pitch. I see this a lot from companies that go and do some sort of presentation, pitch, or sales meeting regularly. And what they fail to do is tailor the pitch to the person who's listening to it. The impact that this has is it makes the buyer or decision maker think, this is going to be irrelevant to me. There's nothing here that's of interest, and it's a standard canned pitch or presentation that they've just got the PowerPoint off somebody at head office, and they're now going to subject me to this, and it's another death by PowerPoint. That's the very last thing you want people to think in your presentations, pitches, or sales meetings, but very often the emotion they get, and you get them bored, tired, and in some cases almost falling asleep before you've even started. That's your fault for not tailoring it and making them think that it's irrelevant. The second thing that not tailoring your pitch, the second impact it has, is it usually immediately results in a loss of rapport. In other words, the ability to get on well, to be trusted, to get your ideas taken on board by the other person is massively affected. Therefore, they're less willing to listen to you. So you definitely find they switch off and they're less willing to take on board your ideas. Thirdly, it looks like you've done no research. It looks like you're not very credible and you couldn't be bothered taking the time to get to know them to make this presentation relevant for them. This certainly isn't doing you any favours at this stage. Fourthly, then the prospect gets bored and switches off. They stop listening to you, they stop taking on board your ideas, and they're looking for this meeting to end quickly, or this pitch to end quickly. That's definitely not the emotional state of buying, and certainly not the emotional state of agreeing to the next step. Yet often presentation, pitches, and sales meetings result in that kind of outcome. The third mistake I want to talk about in today's session, which is mistake number 8, is not reading the other person, not reading the other party. Now, this is difficult if you're on a phone call, but in most cases when you're pitching, presenting, or you've got a formal sales meeting, that's done either face-to-face or certainly over the web where you've at least got sight of the person, you've got a visual on the other person. So when I say not reading the other person is a mistake that a lot of people make, how I kind of break that down is, first of all, not reading their body language or their interest. So when somebody, as a general rule, when somebody starts to lose interest in your presentation, body language that could signify that is them starting to lean back, start to move in the chair, etc., etc. That shows a little bit of disinterest in the presentation. As opposed to them leaning forward, looking more excited and interested, etc., etc., reading some of their body language and what we might call their indicator of interest or disinterest can make a big difference to your presentation. Because if you've started to lose people, or they become disinterested and not listening as much, you need to engage them quickly. You need to do an intervention in that situation to make sure you've got the best chance of getting your result. If you lose people during the presentation and fail to bring them back, you've got a much more difficult job in getting a positive outcome from your session. The second thing I mean when somebody isn't reading the other person is that if somebody's asking questions of you, if a prospect is asking questions of you in a sales situation, that's a sign that they're interested. They're asking questions for more clarity, to get more knowledge or understanding, and it's a good sign that they're interested in your presentation. Whether you take those questions straight away or take them at the end, the fact they've got questions, and particularly if they're writing things down, that's really useful. The only caveat to that is if your presentation's really bad and they're writing things down about how bad you are, that's obviously not a good thing. But in most cases, asking questions and writing things down is a good indicator that your presentation, your pitch, or your sales meeting is on the right track. The third thing I want to look at here is If the buyer or the prospect is cutting in or cutting off your sentences, constantly interrupting, particularly with objections, that's a sign that your presentation's off track. Also that your credibility and your authority has been threatened because they're now not believing some of the things you're saying and they're directly challenging you. If that's happened, you need to get them back on track quickly, otherwise the whole of this presentation could be lost. If the other person is looking to hurry you up, if they're looking to speed up the conversation, ask you to get to the point, look out the window, keep looking at their watch, ask you how long it's going to take, say they've only got a few minutes left, etc., etc., they're hurrying you up and putting pressure on you, again is a sign of disinterest. This again needs some sort of intervention, because if you don't turn this around, the likelihood of you getting your outcome objective, whether it's primary or secondary, from this meeting, pitch or presentation is highly unlikely. Another mistake that people make, mistake number 11, is that they're not comfortable with selling. This is one of the biggest problems for small business owners or non-professional salespeople, in that because they're not full-time selling, they're not comfortable or confident with the sales process. I remember back to one example where I was with a client of mine in consultancy, sat on a buying panel with them, and we had a number of vendors coming in to talk to us about marketing and design services. I would say that 80% of the people who turned up for that pitch were not comfortable or confident with the selling process. That caused major problems in getting buy-in from us on the buying panel and also getting their objective of winning our work. There were some terrible mistakes they made that I'll go into as I go through this piece. So what do I mean by not comfortable with selling? First of all, anybody who hates to think of themselves as a salesperson usually has issues, concerns or challenges when it comes to selling, pitching or presenting. So if your role isn't full-time sales and you've not had years of experience, then this can certainly happen to you. Even for full-time salespeople who are less experienced or it's been tough recently, they get some concerns or they're less comfortable with selling in general. If you're a business owner who set your business up and it's say a photography business when you're a really good photographer, or a video business where you're a really good videographer, for example, again, those people tend not to think of themselves as salespeople. Solicitors, accountants, for example, again, this would be true there. If your role has other responsibilities apart from sales, say operations or admin, or you're the only person in the business, if you hate to think yourself as a salesperson, you won't be comfortable with selling. Therefore, the outcome of your meetings, pitches and presentations, unless they've already decided to buy, which will be a small percentage, is usually going to result at very best in "I'd like to think about it," which in a lot of cases is a nice way of saying no. Particularly, those people never come back to you, you definitely know it was a nice way of saying no. Another thing that people have when they're not comfortable with selling is if you don't like being sold to, it usually makes it more difficult for you to sell. So if you don't like being sold to, it usually makes it more difficult for you to sell. So in other words, because you don't like to be being sold to, you tend to avoid the things that people have sold to you or the way they behaved in the process. You tend to avoid those things when you're presenting, pitching or holding some kind of sales meeting with a client. And what happens there is all the things that you need to be successful, so controlling the situation, handling objections, asking for commitment, etc., etc., you tend to drop those out in the process and you become too nice and friendly with them and allow them to get their objectives from the presentation and not yours. Usually their objectives are not to buy, certainly at very best to think about it in your first meeting or first pitch, and therefore you've ruined your chance of winning the business quickly and possibly even at all. So if you don't like being sold to, it's very likely you'll have some challenges when it comes to selling, promoting, pitching, or running meetings with clients or potential clients. The third thing I want to talk about, third aspect of not being comfortable with selling, is if you wish you could spend more time doing. So this might be if you're a solicitor that wants to spend more time doing the actual job that you trained for rather than presenting or promoting or going to networking events. You might be a business owner who's a very good videographer or photographer themselves, that you actually want to be out videoing or taking pictures rather than actually working on the sales side. So if you'd rather spend more time doing your role in the business rather than selling. This again is a big indicator that you're not comfortable with selling, so therefore you'll be getting far worse sales results than you could do with some kind of simple system. If selling makes you nervous or uncomfortable, that's another great sign. Again, lack of comfort with the selling, poorer results from a pitch, presentation, or a meeting with a prospect, for example. If the thought of it makes you nervous, you're not quite sure how to go about it, for example, that will definitely cause you some problems. Usually there are two things that happen when somebody's nervous or uncomfortable with selling. First of all is they've not done it the right way, so therefore they've not been comfortable with it, they've been sold too badly in the past, they don't like to think of themselves as a salesperson or any of the above things on the screen there, or they don't know what to do. So if they had a simple step-by-step system to follow that got results, they could do that while they focus on the other bits of the business. That's the thing I want to talk about particularly. So I promise you I'll talk a little bit about, once I talk about the mistakes and where to get more information, what you could do in terms of the next step. So one of the things I'd like to talk about now is how to get all the new customers you want. This is an event I'll be running very soon. In that event, I'm going to talk about the 17 biggest mistakes that small business owners make, or people who aren't full-time salespeople, and what to do about them. These are mistakes that cost them money, and it's money that's being left on the table right now. I'm also going to talk about how to get more customers without coming across as a typical salesperson. Because if customers or prospects spot that you're being salesy and like a typical salesperson, that will cause a reaction in them that causes them not to buy. Certainly won't buy now and probably won't buy in the future. So again, a simple way where you can get new customers without coming across as a typical salesperson, that's really useful. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about how to develop a never-ending stream of new clients. So again, there's new clients and new customers coming in without having for you to work hard, really hard on each one particularly. I'm also going to talk about how to get more confident and comfortable with sales and the selling process in general. How you can become more comfortable with it, how it becomes much easier for you, and therefore how you can get better results. I'm also going to talk about how you can stop working long hours for little reward. So you're probably putting too much time in right now, or lots of hours trying to get a reward from the business. What I want to talk about is how you can get a fantastic return on effort. Do simple things on a consistent basis and you get great results in terms of new customers. I'm also going to talk about how to get people to chase you, not the other way around. So you don't come across as desperate, you're not continually ringing people or hoping business comes in. People are chasing you and wanting to do business with you. I'm also going to talk about who you should be spending time with, what to say to them, and how to get them to buy from you. That's a critical thing that if you put that into your business or your role, you'll get great sales results quickly. And I'm also going to talk about how to get lots of new customers at the prices that you want to charge and the margins and profits that you want to make. So this event is called How to Get All the New Customers You Want. It's held on Thursday, 8th of November, and it's a full day with me working on improving your sales process and getting better results and more customers quickly. It's held at Bredbury Hall Hotel in Stockport in Manchester. And I'm doing this at a cost price of only £49 plus VAT. I want to help people that I've worked with in the past or have been to see me or seen something online. I know I can get great results and my techniques will get amazing results for you if you implement them and come to an event like this. So I want to do what I can to encourage you to come along, to see some of my techniques, to put them into practice for you and get great results. So if you want to go over to www.getnewclients.co.uk straight away, that'll give you a booking form and details on the event. So if you go over right now to www.getnewclients.co.uk, go over there and those of you who are interested, sign up for the event. For the first people who do that tonight, I will give them a free CD on improving their sales results and getting more customers. For the first two people that go over to getnewclients.co.uk and sign up for this, I'll give you a free CD with my compliments. So I'll give you a minute to do that right now. On this event as well, I'm also going to talk about social media. I'm going to talk about the biggest lies that most people tell you about social media and what you can do to get far better results from it. Most things that these so-called social media experts tell you don't actually work, and if they do get you new leads, they get you the wrong kind of new leads. If you take an example from the system that I have for social media, this shows how to get lots of customers from it, ones who want to do business with you, ones who are prepared to pay the price that you charge, but that needs to be done in a specific way, which I'm going to share with you if you're at this event. So as I say, it's £49. If you want to come along, get across to www.getnewclients.co.uk right now and come along. Okay, so I promise you some bonus content on things you can do to dramatically improve the quality and the results of your pitches, presentations, and your sales meetings. So let's look at that now. So the bonus content I'm going to give you, the biggest thing you can do to get better results is prepare for your meetings, pitches, and presentations in a specific way. So, what's the advice I would give you around preparing for those meetings for you to get better results? First of all, you want to research the company that you're presenting to. So typically on their webpage, things like their About Us, if they've got a Meet the Team, if they've got a news tab on their website, have a look at that. You can find out some fantastic things. Do a Google search for them, or do something on Google News where you're looking for press releases, maybe articles that have been written recently, things that are topical that we'll be able to have what I would call a conversation starter. You can start a conversation within your presentation or sales meeting that gives you a bit more credibility and shows you've done some homework. So researching the company particularly, looking for news about them if they've recently opened an office in the US, if been doing an exhibition in the Middle East, things that you can talk about that shows you bothered to do some research. The second thing I'd do is research the brief or the information I've been given. So if you're a creative company that's pitching for work, or anybody that's been asked to go and pitch, you've probably been given a brief on what they're looking for beforehand. Have a look at the brief, do some research around that, see what's going to help you. If it's something like a Meet the Buyer event where you've only got 10 minutes to pitch the company and your objective is to get them interested enough to have a meeting at a later point in time, you'll have been given some information on that company. Again, doing some research, first of all, to enable you to tailor your pitch, as I talked about earlier, but secondly, to mention in the meeting to give you some credibility. That's a really important point. Third thing I want to do here is make sure you research the individual. The best place to do this is linkedin.com. Have a look at the individual you're meeting, their job title, their responsibilities, anything in their status about current things they've done, or recent things they've done. Have a look at their job history, where they've worked before, who you might know, there are things you can talk about, where they're educated, for example, groups they might be part of, mutual contacts you might have in common. Look for anything on that LinkedIn profile that's going to give you a conversation starter, again, to warm this meeting up as quickly as possible. Next thing I recommend you do is make contact first. So if it's at the Meet the Buyer event where you don't know the person that well, you've not spoken to them beforehand, make contact with them over LinkedIn or Twitter, for example. Follow them on Twitter. Look to get engaged on some of the social or business networks so that you're putting you as an individual on their radar before they've met you. If it's a formal pitch or presentation, definitely contact on LinkedIn and try and get some dialogue or conversation going before the pitch so they're more familiar with you than potentially some of the other vendors. That's a really good tip. And finally, make sure you ask for your outcome at the end of the pitch or presentation or sales meeting. So you should have defined what your outcome is if you've not fallen foul of the first mistake I mentioned. You should have designed your presentation, pitch or meeting around your outcome, and now you're going to ask for your primary outcome or your secondary outcome at the end of the pitch. If you do that and get commitment to it, you're far more likely to have a successful meeting, pitch or presentation situation, and far more likely to get the new customers and the sales that you deserve. So, if you've got any questions that I didn't have time to cover in today's session, the best way to get those answered is go to www.andypreston.com. There's an Ask Andy tab on there. Pop me a question over there and I'll answer it by return. So andypreston.com is a great place to get any further questions you've got about pitching, presenting or sales meetings, or any sales question in general. Get them answered there. If you want to stay in touch with me, you can get me on Twitter at Andy Preston. Search for Andy Preston on LinkedIn and you'll find me pretty easily, or via the website andypreston.com. So make sure you don't make the mistakes that other people make when they're pitching, presenting or sales meetings. Take some of the tips I've given you today instead. I hope to stay in touch with some of you over the web and I'll obviously see some of you on the 8th of November at Bredbury Hall. Thanks very much for taking part in today's session, and I'll keep in touch with you soon. Thanks very much.